Hi, I'm Marissa, an American living in France.
I'm Astrid, a German who moved to the US. We met back in 2006 online. Isn't that how every love story starts these days? We actually met in a miscarriage support group where we became frequent posters and fast friends. Fast forward to today, we have both been blessed with beautiful children, and living on different continents, we realize how often our conversations revolve around the difficulties of raising them in a culture that's not our own. We started this podcast because surely we're not the only ones who have issues. Who feel this way.
Welcome to Culture Clash Parenting, the podcast where laughter meets learning on the wild ride of raising kids in foreign lands. Join us, two Atlantic crossing moms with over a decade of parenting wisdom now under our belts. From navigating language barriers to blending traditions, we've got you covered with heartwarming tales and practical tips. If you're a parent far from home, feeling exhausted from juggling multiple cultures, or maybe you're eyeing that international move but feeling a bit daunted, you're in the right place. We're here to sprinkle some joy, share some laughs, and remind you that you're not alone on this adventure. So settle in, grab a cup of tea or wine, no judgment, and join us as we navigate the intricacies of parenting in a world that's anything but familiar. Get ready for a dose of empathy, a dash of humor, and a whole lot of love. Let's dive into this beautiful mess of raising kids in a different culture together. Hey, it's Marissa. I just wanted to pop in editing the podcast episode. We noticed that I said crystal mass a bunch of times instead of candle mass. So we wanted to correct that mistake here. I apologize for my tongue-tiedness. And just give a little bit of background about what Candlemas is. So it's also known as the Feast of the Presentation of Jesus. And it was to celebrate the day in which Joseph and Mary presented Jesus at the temple, which is 40 days after his birth. So it's the conclusion of that Christmas to Epiphany season, and it takes place on the 2nd of February every year. That's my understanding. Again, apologies for for misspeaking, and we'll see you on the next podcast episode. Yay! I know we've been talking about this for a long time. So this is episode 4, Holidays, Part 1, how to keep two cultures and their holidays alive during this busy season. Astrid, this is going to be a great episode.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've been waiting for the holidays episodes since there are hopefully going to be more than one. Because when we talked about it, a couple of days ago, last week, I think we have a lot more planned for you guys than just today about holidays, because it is also a 2 month long season. So let's dive
Exactly.
into this.
Awesome. Totally. So, yeah, so really and part of the reason that there are going to be lots of episodes is because, and I think it was fun for us, um, is because this was one of those ones where we could talk to our kids and be like, what's your take on it? Like,
Well, how did you experience it when you were in this country or in this country? Go
so,
ahead.
yeah, so let's jump in.
Yeah, we always talk about it. Oh, we're looking forward to the holidays, especially when you're a kid, because later it's really just a busy season. But what you and I love about it so much, Marissa, is that we can bring our own culture in with it. So it's almost like, yes, it makes it busier, it makes it more difficult in some ways, but it makes it so much more, I'm looking for the English word for facettenreich. Like, there are so many more facets to it. Like, if you bring in the American tradition and the French or German ones, and you can kind of blend it all, and in that way you can make sure you celebrate. You have so many more holidays than everybody else around you. And
That
it's kind of
too.
cool for the kids.
I think that's a really fun part for the kids. Like you said, it's exhausting for us. It's like, and I think it's true, like whether you live in a different country or if you're married to somebody from a different country or different culture, like you and I've talked about like celebrating Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the Jewish holidays, um, with and mingling them with like the Christian and the Catholic holidays. Like there's always it just does feel like your calendar gets really full. And it's easy to forget, like, oh my gosh, like, did Yom Kippur happen already? Like, but it's somewhat easier with Google Calendar and like being able to just like have Google tell you what holiday it is. But it is also a really fun way, I think, for like our kids to learn our traditions and to keep the traditions from our culture and our upbringing alive and to carry those on. And it gives our kids and us something to talk about when you're meeting other parents and you're like, oh yeah, like this is how we celebrate Hanukkah or this is how we celebrate Christmas or this is how we celebrate Thanksgiving, which is like the first, this is episode's going to come out right before Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was the first episode that we really wanted to talk about because it's a holiday that Americans love to celebrate and Europeans have no clue what it is.
Well, I think Europeans do they've heard of it.
Yes, yeah,
There's always Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin.
true. And Charlie Brown Thanksgiving and
Right. I'm sure everybody in Europe has now heard of it. And actually, when I was growing up in Germany, there was a Ernte Dankfest, which is a kind of a harvest thank you festival. So it is like Thanksgiving, where but it was more of a religious thing than it is here, and it certainly wasn't followed by Black Friday to go shopping. So it was mostly something that was like celebrated in churches. And actually, I did ask my daughter, who was there last year, for Thanksgiving, and she said, no, nobody even gave it a thought.
yeah.
But yes, here we do like to celebrate it all on. And I think when we were talking about it before, we said, but I'll tell you what happens here, and then you fill in because I'm not from here, so I just go to wherever somebody tells me to go, and there's always turkey. There's always a big feast, right? Football is on in one room, and usually the guys sit around and watch football, and everybody else is in the kitchen preparing all that. Actually, I think some people prepare for maybe a week, and because a lot of dishes, and the staples are turkey and sweet potatoes, which have marshmallows on top. So it makes them even sweeter. It's almost like a desserty kind of thing. Oh no, because dessert is pumpkin pie. And then the cranberry sauce, not to forget the cranberry sauce, because that's
Because you gotta
if
have
you're
the
lucky.
tart. You gotta have the cranberry sauce.
Well, yes, and at first I was thinking, what is this? Why my very first Thanksgiving? I'm like, why cranberry sauce? Why would you put this on there? But actually at IKEA we put lingonberry sauce on the meatball, so it's kind of the meat, the savory with the sweet. So it makes sense. Oh, and then there's usually a green bean casserole. Those are basically the staples of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And I would throw in we always had the sweet potatoes and regular mashed potatoes. Um, and then you were joking about how often a lot of people, like a lot of places will have like a fun run in the morning, like a 5K. And and the people
Turkey trot.
the turkey trot and the people who do it like show up with like a salad.
Yeah, because you don't want to run. Well, actually, some people do the turkey trot in the morning in order to just eat all afternoon and then watch football, maybe take a nap and get to the mall the next day. And other people do the run and then go, oh, now I've started my day working out. I'm not going to pig out at dinner. So how about we'll bring a salad? So when you show up with a salad, though, you're kind of the outcast, at least in this family.
Totally. Because I think like, I mean, the stereotype of the Thanksgiving meal just being like gluttonous and overabundant. And it's always like I remember just growing up and watching TV shows, right? And they would always talk about like wearing sweatpants because your belly was going to expand and you were just going to bust out of any pair of jeans after the meal. Um,
Like Joey on Friends,
Joey on Friends, yeah.
when he put on the maternity pants.
Totally. We always used to talk about like second dinner because you have dinner so early that like you're hungry again. But before it's bedtime, like if you're eating dinner at 4, you're gonna be hungry at 8. Um,
But luckily, there are always tons of leftovers.
Tons of leftovers because yeah. Um, and then I think for us, you like you said to like it's a multi-day cooking affair. Like there's something very familial when like in the true I'm saying the true practice of Thanksgiving, but I mean sort of like the more like positive connected pieces of Thanksgiving where like it is like a multi-day cooking affair. Like my mom usually gets the turkey a couple of days before and like brines it. So it's sitting in a
Wow.
marinade like usually by Wednesday, if not Tuesday, so that she can put it in the oven on Wednesday at like noon because it takes 8 hours to cook. It takes like 3 to 4 hours to cook, depending on the size. So like there is kind of all of these steps along the way. And like each one of those as a kid, I remember like just really feeling like this is bigger than just this one day.
Yeah.
Um, and and then we were joking when we were talking about this because I don't know if this is a New York thing or a like Gen X thing, but growing up in New York in the 80s and 90s, like we always had a Thanksgiving assembly at school, and we would like make pilgrim costumes and Native American costumes and like do like a show and sing songs and like tell the story of the first Thanksgiving. And it was to like decades later learned, how whitewashed that story was. Um, but
You mean they didn't all sit down at the same table and have had a big feast?
my understanding is they did. And
And you
then,
like to keep it that way, right?
well, no, I've actually read up about it. Like when I was writing my book, and Thanksgiving was, obviously one of the. So I wrote a book about like everybody celebrates with world traditions and holidays, and so I wanted to pick some that people knew and many that people didn't. And Thanksgiving, when I picked it, I did research about like what was the first Thanksgiving like. So they did like the natives uh, tribe helped the the pilgrims learn how to plant and harvest their first um, their first uh, foods
Crop.
when it came to the New World, their first crops. Thank you. And so they did. They sat down, they had this meal. But like the peace didn't last much longer, right? Like, it was like, great, now we're not going to die. Now we know how to feed ourselves in this new world, and now we can try and take your land. So I know for a lot of, and we're kind of joking about it, but there are a lot of people and who really see Thanksgiving as um, not the not just the capitalist holiday that it's become, but not the warm story that many of us were told as children, but um, really an opportunity to talk about and promote and shine light on the treatment of the First Nations people that were in the U.S. And in Canada when the early English
Settlers.
settlers, I colonizers, settlers came, um, and uh, And so there are people who choose to celebrate Thanksgiving through the lens of Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Thanksgiving. But I think that aside, like at its core, and you and I were talking about this with like the German holiday too, like just that sentiment of gratitude
Yeah.
because it is the harvest, and there are a lot of harvest festivals throughout the year in different cultures and traditions, giving gratitude to nature, to one another, um, for the amount of work that was put in to put this food on the table. And I'm not sure many people do that anymore. But many do. We do. That's one of the things that we like have kept celebrating Thanksgiving here is that the like what are you grateful for? And we go around the table and talk about what we're grateful for. And um
Yeah, that's probably my favorite part about it, because it gives us kind of a sense of community and belonging. It also helps you get to know people more and sometimes find out if it's extended family, sometimes find out things that happened to them that you didn't even really weren't even aware of. And um
yeah.
that then sometimes you feel really bad, but either way, you're still with family. I guess it's still a kind of a good feeling too.
Yeah. And you mentioned Friends. Like, I think many of us, especially of our age and generation, growing up watching Friends, like Friendsgiving, right?
Mhm.
Like, if it's also an opportunity. I remember when we lived in Seattle, we couldn't go home for Thanksgiving, so we had Friendsgiving. Um, and one year, funny story about that, we all had to bring like we all like kind of randomly signed what we were going to bring, and somebody I don't even remember who it was or what her name was, but I will never forget this dish. So she had dessert, and she made an apple pie with like those cinnamon Mike and Ike's. I don't remember what the like they're like
Oh
red
yeah,
hots, red hot.
they're
So
they're
like
they're, they're spicy, right?
yeah, they're like the super spicy, but also like fire engine red. So like we're like eating this meal and it was delicious, and I'm sure there's all sorts of chemicals that we shouldn't have been eating in
Of course.
in those candies. But like I still to this day, 20 plus years later, just remember her bringing out this like dessert that was like the color of a red Sharpie. I was just like, what is this? And it was like you said, like the stories, right? It was, like she was like telling like where the recipe came from, and like that this was like something that our family made every year, and that like um and so it was this opportunity to also hear
Get
other
to
people
know her.
get to know her and be like, this is great.
Try
I've
out
never made
something
it.
new.
Yeah. It was not a recipe that I kept. Um,
It was not a traditional English trifle though that Phoebe made.
no, no.
Okay, good.
Yeah. That was it Phoebe or was it Rachel?
No, Phoebe made it, I think.
Was
No,
it?
and Rachel. You're right.
The
Yes, it was
two pages were
Rachel.
stuck together, so it had like meat in it. Um,
Yep.
yeah. So I think it's one of those holidays where we've lived here for 15 years now, and um it's one of the American holidays that we always make an effort to celebrate. We don't celebrate on Thursday because the kids have school and get home late, and uh, I don't want to be cooking by myself for 48 hours. But so
Yeah.
we usually do it on Saturday, and we'll do it with like a group of other Americans, or we'll invite Americans to our house, or a few times we've invited French people to have the experience. Um, but yeah, it's always it's for me, it's about family. It's a family holiday. And so it's one of the traditions that I really want to keep alive here. Um, I'm curious because we were talking, like, tell us a little bit more about the German one, because I think it's interesting that, again, like so many cultures have harvest festivals, and many of them are tied to this concept of gratitude.
Well, I think that's because the traditionally people planted their own crops um and traditionally people were somewhat religious. So even if even if they weren't praying to a god, but maybe a holy cow or elephants or whatever, but they believed in something. They had a belief system. And that's why they're grateful for the harvest, because it wasn't just them. So somebody else made it rain, or something else made it rain, even if it was the universe or karma or what have you. But you had to give thanks to something other than yourself that the harvest came out right and you could eat it, right? So I think that's probably why every culture has some sort of a harvest festival in some ways. Um, the Erntedankfest in Germany that I grew up with was, I don't even think we went every year, but some churches somewhere always had a specific mass dedicated to this season, and thank you, Lord, for the harvest, and then maybe in our church it was the library. They had like a little brunch thing after the service on Sunday morning set up where you had a little piece of all the harvest, but it wasn't anything huge. It was nothing like what I've experienced in the United States, and it was certainly not necessarily invite your family to go, but it was your church family that went, I guess. If you want, it was not something that that the way I remember it, or maybe my family was just not that religious. No, we were well, most of my family was more like the Christmas and Easter church goer, the every Sunday. But it's not something that you could probably write a big book about, the German Erntedankfest. There aren't specific dishes like in America that always are always there. I always have to be there. Oh, I don't know.
That's so interesting because I do like, and so part of like part two, because we've already talked about what part two is going to be, is recipes, because a lot of these holidays really do have these traditions, and Thanksgiving is definitely one of them, where people also have their favorite version of um of the recipe. So like I was talking about this woman with her bright red apple pie and like Rachel's trifle.
Traditional English trifle.
English trifle for
beef sauteed with peas and onions, and then a layer of cream or custard, something like that.
If you haven't watched that episode, stop, like pause now and go watch it and then come back.
Go watch Friendsgiving.
Go watch Friendsgiving episode. But I think like part of what is different for sure here, and when I asked my kids, and you mentioned this earlier too with Franzia when she was in Germany last year, like even when you celebrate Thanksgiving here, there isn't that level of sort of overconsumption that exists in the US. I think just again, because it's like not part of the culture here. And even as Black Friday has become more and more popular here, and it's just kind of funny because it's Black Friday here starts on the Friday after Thanksgiving. People don't know why, like they don't connect it to Thanksgiving, right? They're just like, oh, it's Black Friday. But they're super happy to to get the discount to go shopping. But I remember in the States, it was like the stores open at midnight, right? And now it's like getting earlier and earlier and earlier. It's just like more and more of an opportunity. And for me growing up, we would go watch the parade, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, because I grew up around the corner from it. And like the night before, we had this family tradition with other families where they would come over and we would go watch the balloons get blown up. And like it is one of those, I think in some ways maybe because of the consumption, like the overconsumption, some of my favorite memories, like it's just one of those holidays that people in the US celebrate, like the entire country is celebrating. It's like right, like uh the like biggest air travel day in the US. Not
Not
anymore.
Thanksgiving. No, not Thanksgiving. The day before,
Oh yeah,
yes.
the day before.
And
But
then
I
the
mean
Sunday,
like for Thanksgiving, like so that you can go home. Yeah.
because what I have noticed in the past 3 years, I flew to Germany for Thanksgiving the first 2 years because my father was sick and I felt like I had to go. But last year I just did it because I figured out that the flights are really cheap. If you actually travel on Thanksgiving Day, there's like nobody else around. The security lines are short. The three agents that work at the airport that day are all in a great mood because they've only had to deal with 10 customers all morning. It's fantastic. It's my favorite day to fly now.
I love
Yes,
this. See, Astrid tips. Fly on Thanksgiving.
if you're leaving the United States, you want to do it on Thanksgiving Day. Yes.
I love it. And so yeah, like it's interesting because to like hear you talk about and like in Germany the harvest holiday and and here in France there really isn't anything similar um around like a meal with like the turkey and the lingonberry or jam, which I
That's
think
right. You said you got the lingonberry sauce the first year
yeah,
because they didn't have ocean spray cranberry
those
sauce in the
spray cans
can.
were like super expensive. Yeah, we did, right? But like so here like that kind of meal is around Christmas. But it's always like uh it's really interesting to see the how like because food is such an important part of holidays. And so when you and I were talking about like which holidays people love to celebrate, like it makes me laugh that you're like, oh yeah, like we didn't really uh like celebrate it much because it was this Christian one, like, and it sounds like there just wasn't like the food connection to it, right? And so
Your story.
like I do think there's a part of that, like, and so the one that we talked about for France was Chandeleur, which is yeah, crystal mast, and um, and it's like also known as Nutella Day or Crepe Day because you make a crepe and like there's traditions around flipping the crepe when you're cooking them. Um, but like nobody knows like what is crystal mass and like at like the root, right? You just ask people like, oh, like what are we celebrating? They're like, ah, whatever. It's Chandeleur. Like have a crepe. Like they just don't have that connection to the religious history of the holiday. It's just all about the food.
But yet they're flipping the crab to get good luck for the rest of the year or the next year, right?
Yeah, so they do this thing where they hold a penny in their hand while they flip the cup in the pan, and I think like and if you catch it, then you get good luck, and if it like folds over or falls on the floor, then you're SOL.
SOL.
um, and
It's
but
funny, guys, because we're looking at each other while we're recording this, and you're only listening to it. But I saw what Versa really wanted to say there.
I know. I thought for just like I was like, oh wait, I specifically said that we do not have expletives in our podcast, so I have to pause.
Your SOL.
I had to stop that one. But I was telling you, like it is Nutella Day. Like it's February 2nd every year, and for like a week in advance, like people know like Nutella is going to be on sale on February 2nd. And so like there's like you just like the stores are mobbed on February 2nd by parents who have children who are addicted to Nutella and like or other like hazelnut spread. But like and so like a couple of days before you start going to the store and there's like no Nutella on the shelf because they're like hoarding it and saving it to put out on February 2nd when it goes on sale for like buy one get one free or whatever. And
Good thing Nutella has a long shelf life. You just buy it for the whole year.
yeah, it's definitely the day where people are where kids get to overdose. Even I remember my kids being little and coming home from school because they would make the cup at school and they would come home with like the chocolate mustache and um, from having crêpe au chocolat at school. Like, and they're bouncing off the wall. And you're like, okay, like it's Chandeleur. Like this is just what it's gonna be. Um, But then there is also that community piece. Like our next door neighbors who are retired, and so their kids are grown and their grandkids live far away. Like she still makes crepe every year for Chandeleur, and then she and her husband have like maybe four, but she makes like the whole batch, right? Like the normal size batch, and so she brings the rest of them over to us, and so um, it's like I feel like it's a really sweet tradition, and a lot of the schools do that too, where parents will volunteer and to make the cup with the kids. And as you know, Astrid, like parent volunteerism is not as big here in Europe. We talked about it on the last episode a little bit, but and so it is one of those holidays where parents are like, all right, I can sacrifice a few hours and go to school and make some cut with the kids. So the
It's
teacher
also probably one of the few days that parents are even allowed on school property.
inside the school, inside the bus.
Yeah.
You don't have to ring the doorbell.
In America, you have to walk your kids to school, especially when they're little. Um,
That is not
not
that's
a
not
thing
really
in Europe.
integrated in the culture here, as we talked about. So
Yeah.
we've talked about Thanksgiving and we've talked about Chandeleur.
And we
Um,
forgot Halloween because
and
that
we
actually
forgot
does
Halloween.
happen. Since we're
It's
preparing for
another
Thanksgiving, we totally forgot that we
overconsumption.
had Halloween.
Exactly. So if if you haven't learned, if you don't know Astrid and I outside of this podcast, if this is your first foray into getting to know us, we like food. And
No.
and so the holidays that we came up with that everybody likes to celebrate do revolve around food, and specifically overconsumption of food. And so yes, no discussion of that would be complete without Halloween. So,
Yeah, you probably won't hear us talk much about like Pentecost or Yom Kippur for that matter.
yeah, we won't be talking about fasting holidays.
No. But yeah, Halloween was just big, obviously here, and it's October 31st. So, and it's actually the day before All Hallows, or Allerheiligen in German, Toussaint in French. But that's always on November 1st. Nobody celebrates that here. Like that is not in Germany. That's like a national holiday. Nobody goes to work. It's if you're lucky, it falls on a Thursday, and it makes a nice long weekend out of it because you get that bridge day in between. But here, yeah, nobody cares about that. But we're all about the All Hallows, or the Halloween
The
Eve
All
before.
Hallows Eve.
All Hallows Eve, exactly. And and of course, everybody knows kids dress up in costumes and they walk around, they say trick or treat. And when they knock on the door, or people are already outside with their bowls of candy, and the kids get a ton of candy. Um, it's it seriously, I used to give my kids these little baskets. So they make them at the dollar store in plastic, little pumpkins, and you put your candy in there. Maybe a bag, but kids these days they take pillowcases
Yeah.
because it fits more candy, which happens to be great for the parents because they get parent candy tax, and that way they can get more of it. And if you still have a small child that you're accompanying, you can go, okay, well, remember, mommy loves Kit Kat. Why don't you give her a Kit Kat or whatever it is, right? Um, so, and if you've trained your kids well enough after you've taken them 3-4 years in a row, they will get you whatever candy you have asked for previously. But like I said, they walk around, they say trick or treat, they get candy everywhere but in this town, which seems to be the only town where kids have to tell jokes. And to every transplant, it's a whole new thing.
I love
Actually,
this. Like, say more about this, because this is, I think we're talking about like different traditions in different places, and this is like a somewhat unique, or as far as we know, like unique to St. Louis tradition on Halloween.
yeah.
So, like, I'm like,
Tell a
this blew
joke.
my mind when you told me this.
Yeah, and I mean, people who live just on the on the other side of the river in Illinois do not have this tradition. They get invited by friends to go trick-or-treating in St. Louis, and they come over and their kids are unprepared because they don't have a joke prepared to tell.
So tell me about the preparation. Like, what's the preparation like for kids in St. Louis in the lead up to Halloween? Are they like reading through joke books and writing things down?
Well, I mean, every kid at some age has a knock knock joke, right? Our 3-year-old, I was just happy that to get her to say trick or treat and thank you after getting the candy. And people still asked her, well, do you have a joke? And she's just looking at them going, and then she would turn around and just leave. She's like, that's just putting a lot of pressure on a 3-year-old.
I love that. I think that's really cool because I feel like there's an element too of like growth. Like it, I told you like we're the house that people don't want to come to because as Americans, like the more Halloween has become bigger and bigger here in France, and we're the ones who are like, what do you say? Right when they like ring the doorbell. Like, it's like, no, we're just not giving you candy. Like,
You're the mean Americans that insist on the rules.
yeah, you got to say something. Um, and and so I actually kind of like the joke thing because I mean, and we're not so mean, but like in France, like they say like bonbon sort, like trick or treat. They just translate it direct, but we always would make them say trick or treat. We would like make them say the English. Like we're going to teach you English while you're at our house. This is an educational Halloween. Um, but I love the idea of a joke. I'm totally going to implement that next year. I'm going to make all the French kids who come to our house. If you live in Bordeaux and you know where I live, this is your opportunity to not come to my house for a trick or treat next year.
And the joke has to be in English, or can it be a French joke?
No, you can tell me they can tell me a French joke, but I'm totally
Like the croissant pané.
I'm bringing St. Louis to Bordeaux.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we've gotten used to it, but the first couple of years we had completely forgotten. Like, oh.
But do kids like do they have like one joke that they tell at every house, or do they like?
They usually have one or two, but yes, it's very often the same one.
I love it. I love the idea of like just also watching like from like year to year how their humor changes by the jokes that they choose to tell. Like you said, like everyone has a knock knock joke, but I'm guessing at some point those knock knock jokes are going to get dirty or they're going to turn into like some other like not a knock knock joke. There's going to be like the bad dad jokes.
I've had a 4-year-old who asked what was Tigger looking for in the toilet. So I don't know that it's with age where they get alcohol, but my daughter at one point, my oldest, this was obviously a good, I don't know how many years ago, but she had some quick joke. It was like a knock knock joke, one liner, and I'm totally blanking on what it was. I'll have to ask her, and maybe we'll put it in the show notes if she still remembers it. But I remember taking her around and her telling this joke, and the punchline had something to do with chemical elements, and half the people got it, and the other half the people did not, and it was very clear to anyone who went to high school, right?
I love it.
So that defeats the purpose too. Then you'd rather have Tigger looking for poo in the toilet. I mean, seriously.
Oh my gosh. Well, and it's funny because I mean, we like kind of about the overconsumption and like kind of how Americans tend to overdo their holidays. We're talking about Thanksgiving. Like, I think the same is true about Halloween in that way too. Like, even as Halloween has become more popular here, and like when Halloween first started here in France, it was like you would just see kids dressed as like the girls were dressed as witches and the boys were dressed as skeletons. Like, and that was it. It was like, right, like those are the two costumes that you could find. And it kind of makes sense with All Hallows Eve and Toussaint and Samhain and like all, you know, Dios de los Muertos, right? Like the holidays around like
Death.
death and the veil being thinner. But now, as it's gotten more and more popular, like um, you can find some decorations, but you don't see like the overabundance of decorations. Like you're not going to see a house from 4 blocks away with a giant like inflatable Frankenstein like blowing in the wind. Um, and when we were in the States last year for Halloween, that was one of the things that my kids noticed was like you knew whose house to go to because it was the houses that were decorated. And here there's still the like we're just going to ring every doorbell. Like we're just going to trust that everybody has candy. And so there's still this like I'm waiting to see if like that 15 years from now we can do an updated podcast and see if like they're over decorating French homes. But
Well, the inflatables take up a lot of electricity. You will not find that in Europe because
good point.
you'll have the French parents are going to go, it's not Marseille. We're not doing this.
I'm not paying for this electricity. Totally. Well, and I think you and I talked about like, and so like we wanted to kind of as we're, we talked about holidays that people enjoy celebrating and not that people don't enjoy celebrating the other holidays, but we had to pick just a few. Um, but the other category that we had talked about was different holiday traditions for the same holiday. And that's really a big one. I think even for like Christmas and the winter holidays, well, Christmas is really the only one that people like announce that they're celebrating here. Um, there isn't the same level of like opulent. There's no candy cane lane in Bordeaux. Like there's no, um, people might have uh Christmas lights outside their house, but like they're not having National Lampoon style like contests with their
Inflatables.
neighbors.
You're talking about inflatables again.
I'm talking about the inflatables. One of our
Yeah,
neighbors down the
that's what
street does have like a reindeer that lights up, but like that's the extent, right? And it's like Rudolph size. It's like little like baby reindeer size. It's not the giant reindeer size. So I do think there's also part, and I think your point is really valid. Like a lot of it is that electricity is so expensive here that people are like, no, thank you. Um,
and it's just getting worse there.
yeah.
I did I just remember that we do have a holiday similar to Halloween Halloween is basically split up between two holidays in Germany. The costume part of Halloween and getting, especially as kids, getting into different character and putting on a costume that's not just a ghost or skeleton, but anything, princess, what have you. That's celebrated at Carnival. So,
Right.
but
Same in France.
yeah, and then that's when you can get into a costume rather than Mardi Gras in the States, which is Carnival, but people mostly wear masks and not put on a character kind of costume. But then in November, you get the candy in Germany by just generally putting on your winter coat, or because German parents like to overdress their children for the weather, putting on snowsuits because it's still November. And then you're waddling through the streets with your like lantern that's generally from first grade or even preschool through maybe fifth, sixth grade. I think fifth grade was the last time I made one. But the art teacher generally makes these lanterns from scratch with the kids in school. And then on the 11th of November, which is St. Martin Day. St. Martin was the Holy St. Martin of Tours, was a soldier that shared he took the sword, he shared his cloak with a poor person that was asking, that he was freezing and he was asking for some sort of shelter, and rode away, didn't even accept the thanks. So the song goes. And then the people were trying to make him a saint because of that, and he didn't want to be. He was hiding, basically defected the army, I think, and then was hiding in a goose stable. And anyway, they got him. We still celebrate the Holy Saint Martin of Tours, and and he was riding on a horse when he stopped next to this poor person and then took the red cloak that he was wearing, or so it's depicted, and gave him half of it. And so there's a guy riding on a white horse, generally, in front of this parade of kids with their lanterns, in every town in Germany on November 11th, and like he's wearing the mitra because he's now a saint, right? And then the kids get in the end they get a Weckmann, so it's like a I don't know, it's a baked thing. I don't even know what kind of dough it's made out of because I've never baked one.
So you haven't brought this tradition to America, is what you're saying?
I don't bake, period. So no, this is the last thing I'm gonna do. I've never even baked Christmas cookies. But yeah, they get one of these little bready kind of things, and then they walk around the neighborhood, and they ring the doorbell. And instead of telling a joke, they have to sing one of these St. Martin songs that the music teacher has studied with them all leading up to this holiday, while the art teacher was making the lanterns. And then you sing a song and you get candy. And then, you bring it home and your parents go through that the same way that parents here go through the Halloween candy. And you just have to wait 11 more days and you do that there. So candy is in this season, period, is what I'm trying to say.
Sounds like there's a lot of holidays around. How do we keep the kids happy before Christmas? Like how do we, as it's getting darker outside,
yes.
the nights are getting longer. How do we?
If it's getting darker and colder, then you need more energy, right? So here's the candy.
Yes. We need you to be on sugar high so you can run around outside in the cold without complaining. Yeah, I mean I love this conversation, and like I said, you and we've been friends for a long time, and we often come back to these conversations about different traditions that we have in our families, and the different ways
how we keep them alive for our kids.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of our discussions. So, oh my God, I have to plan this because now I want my kids to be immersed in this culture as well, even though they're growing up in a different culture.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think there's such a beauty, again, going back to those stories, right? Like at the root of all of these holidays are around family and stories and passing them down. And so one of the ways in which I feel like I've been able to stay sane after moving to another country was also being able to connect to those traditions from my past and bring them here too. Because I was already going to be looked at like the weird American mom. But if I'm the weird American mom who is like teaching you how to say trick or treat and giving you like real candy, not like the like kahamba or whatever, but like because we brought back candy corn and whatever from our trip to the US. So like it's like, oh, okay, like this is the way that I can also give back to this culture, but also like feel like I'm a part of mine, and share my stories and help to foster that sense of like understanding and empathy that I think is so important, especially these days. Because the more we know somebody, the harder it is to generalize and stereotype.
True.
And so yeah, and I think you're right. Like it's part of the reason we want our kids to know about where we come from, so that then they get to make their choices going forward about, being curious about the world and other people.
And if they can share, if they can share that then with somebody else in the culture that they're growing up with, it enriches everyone because, like you said, that it's a way of you giving back to them because you feel that the more people know about the other cultures and their backgrounds, the less they're likely to stereotype about them. Or it's just harder to say, oh, I just hate all Americans, when you actually know so many great customs from there, or you can appreciate their even if it's the ocean spray cranberry sauce out of the can that actually comes in it's like Jello and you'd cut it. It's very strange, but you can appreciate it more if you know where that it goes on the turkey, and it makes the savory turkey a little sweeter. But
Totally. I
Marissa,
love too, because what you're like, that's why I like this. You don't have to move to another country. Like you can move to St. Louis on Halloween and have a different color, right? Like, so it's not even necessarily something that you have to experience like by moving someplace, like to a foreign place. Like you can just move to another town, um, and and get to experience their different versions of the traditions. And so, um, I just think it's a great way to connect with people and
and food is always a great way to connect with people too, which is why we are when we continue our holiday series here, as we've got Thanksgiving next week, and then we've got Christmas and Hanukkah coming up, and so we will delve into a few holidays that people celebrate differently in Europe and the US, and we're planning to expand on this with more traditional recipes. Yes, Marissa, I will find out how to make the Wegmänner, and and at least give you the recipe, because I, again, probably won't bake it myself.
I do love to bake.
Nope. But the traditional recipes and customs across the ocean, that's always all going to happen in the next few episodes here. So subscribe and like our podcast so you can stay tuned and get access to the traditional recipes, customs, and maybe some songs. Promise we won't sing for the season.
Yeah.
Across borders, cultures, religions, and languages. You get it all.
Yay. And we would also love to hear your stories. So if you have a favorite holiday, or a favorite tradition from that holiday, please share them. If yeah, share.
Or if you live in a country or are from a culture that has a very similar holiday that's celebrated around the same time of the year, but has nothing to do with what we were talking about, please share that too. We want to learn.
Yeah, we want to hear your stories. Well, my friend, it's always amazing to talk to you. I know we could talk for like another 6 hours about all the different holidays. But yeah, I'll see you next week on our normal call, and and we'll see the listeners in the next podcast episode.
I'll see you for Thanksgiving, I guess.
Yeah,
That would be our normal call. All righty. To everyone else who is celebrating and listening from the States, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Enjoy your holiday.
And if you're not in the States, happy whatever you're celebrating right now.
There you go. Enjoy your holiday as well. Bye.
Bye.